Hello, my name is Denisha Lee, and I'm here to talk about the history of tobacco in the United States. Tobacco was actually introduced to Christopher Columbus in 1492 when trading with the Native Americans. The Native Americans taught Christopher Columbus about tobacco use because it was not something that was familiar to the Europeans. The Native Americans actually used tobacco for meditation and religious purposes and also healing purposes. When the Europeans were introduced to tobacco, they did not look at tobacco as a valuable product. They actually did not know what to do with tobacco. The tobacco was actually discarded by a lot of the Europeans because they did not have a purpose for it, or they did not think that they had a purpose for it. Once the Europeans realized that the Native Americans valued tobacco, they said, hey, you know what? We're going to trade the tobacco that we get from these Native Americans to the other Native Americans because they find it valuable, because they use it for religious purposes and they use it for healing purposes. Tobacco came to the United States around the time of the Revolutionary War. Tobacco was used by a lot of the soldiers in the Revolutionary War and was actually started being rolled and made into cigarettes, like handmade cigarettes, by a lot of the officers in the Revolutionary War. After the practice of rolling tobacco wasn't very common, chewing tobacco became common in the early 1800s. Then, in 1881, James Bonsack made a cigarette rolling machine. Once this cigarette rolling machine was created, the use of cigarettes actually became more popular. They were actually the first cigarettes you can get. When the use of cigarettes became popular, it was glorified in the media. They were on commercials. Movie stars smoked cigarettes. You couldn't turn on a show without seeing the use of cigarettes. I like a lot of old shows like I Love Lucy. I watch a lot of TV Land, the Andy Griffin Show, and where the cigarette use was very common and very plentiful throughout the show because the tobacco habit was not looked upon as something bad. It was actually looked upon as something glamorous. It wasn't until the 1950s where people were starting to get illnesses related to tobacco, like lung disease started to be related to tobacco use, and people started thinking to themselves, hey, maybe tobacco is not as good as we think it is. Maybe this is not something that should be glorified. And once that was discovered, the use of tobacco started to be viewed as not healthy, not a good habit, something that you should not do. I know that I've seen the tobacco commercials when they say this is your brain on tobacco and you shouldn't use tobacco. I've even seen shocking commercials where you'll see a perfectly attractive woman and she'll take out all her teeth or fake teeth because the use of cigarettes have caused her to lose her permanent teeth. So when Americans started getting this glimpse of how tobacco really affects them in a negative way, tobacco use started to be looked upon as something that was actually not glorious or glamorous. It was looked upon as a really bad decision and something that is not good for you. In today's world, there's so many different types of tobacco products that different people can use now if they maybe don't want the smell of tobacco on them, if they want to keep their use of tobacco private. There's e-cigarettes that actually just got banned in a lot of countries because they're causing a different disease that a lot of doctors don't know about yet. So the more that we go on and we dig into the history of tobacco, where it came from a land that we did not know, and it was used for healing purposes and meditation purposes and religion purposes, has actually grown to something that's really a problem for the United States. And even though this has become a problem for the United States, there's still a great deal of people who actually still use tobacco products. I think that this is something that the United States has adopted. It's something that's going to be difficult for the United States to give up. But I do think before you use tobacco, you should really think about all the things that tobacco can bring. Even though this was something that was used for spiritual and healing purposes a long time ago, it's not something that now we look upon in the United States as something that is spiritual or healing. I think that it's causing people health issues, and we should really get to the root of tobacco use today in the United States. Thank you.